particularly under this administration, every housing opportunity that exists, we need to be jumping all over it.
The only time I hear shared housing is when I'm around you. So explain shared housing.
I always start the conversation off of like, how many people in the room have never shared housing? I always have one, for lack of a better term, rocket genius in the room that will raise their hand. And I'm like, you've never shared housing? How did you make it here to this day? You were born. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, you shared housing with your parents? I'm like, are you married? They're like, yes. I'm like, you share housing.
What's the roadblock?
The pushback is like, oh, our clients will never take that. And I'm like, why don't you just take people from your motels or from the encampments, put them in a van, and say, hey, we have some units for you to take a look at. Our first building that we brought on, we leased up those 17 units in less than 2 hours.
Some people, even on their own, will pull their checks and rent a place and split bedrooms.
We made the decision that people were going to say no, and they did not say no. They said yes repeatedly over and over and over and over again.
If you have 3 people that are living in a 3-bedroom apartment, each with their own bedroom,
yep,
you've ended homelessness for 3 people.
Yeah.
If you have 80 people living in tiny shacks in a tiny shack village, they're still fucking homeless.
It's a no-brainer. That's why I tell people all the time. If we want it to be like a really meaningful solution, then you got to give people agency over who they live with. But the truth is,
we have a powerful podcast for you today. But before we start, I need to ask a quick favor. We want to learn more about you, about who's listening and who's watching this podcast so we can make it better and reach more people. Please take a moment to fill out our short survey at invisiblepeople.tv/pod survey. That's invisiblepeople.tv/pod survey. Okay, let's try this again, because the first time I sat down with Kris Freed, we planned to talk about shared housing, but instead we ended up going deep into Kris's personal story. It was powerful, honest, and absolutely worth listening to. I'll link to that episode below, but this time we actually get to the topic we meant to cover. Shared housing is one of those ideas that sounds simple, even obvious, but somehow rarely gets talked about seriously in homelessness policy. Kris has been pushing this model for years, not as a silver bullet, but as a practical tool that can help a lot of people get out of shelters, encampments, and isolation. In this conversation, we talk about what shared housing really is, what it is not, why people need choice and agency in who they live with, and why we've made this option feel strange instead of normal.
Last time, the goal was to talk about shared housing. But you went in a different direction.
it was more fun.
It got you back, so here's part 2.
Love it.
Right? Kris Freed talking about shared housing.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah,
Let's do it.
I hope so.
Okay, cool.
I consider you an expert.
Okay.
Well, you are not only a leader in that space. Back years ago, I'd go into your office, and that's all you would talk about.
It's so funny because somebody had said to me once, like, do you think that, like, we're pushing or that shared housing is a thing because you're talking about it? I was like, just want to be really clear. Shared housing was like back in the Neanderthal days, like they shared caves. Right. I didn't create any of that. Yeah. Like, it's just an intervention or a solution that actually could help people end their homelessness in a more affordable way and with some social capital.
Well, I think it's a brilliant model. I mean, it's not a model to end homelessness, but none of them are. Right? There's so many different people that if we can find a model like shared housing that actually works to get people off the sidewalk or out of the tent or out of the shelter, we should explore it.
In my mind, it's really interesting because I actually think that it could be a solution for a lot of people, right? The thing that absolutely won't work is if somebody came to me and said, hey, Kris, you're going to be moving in with Mark today. And I would be like, Mark who? What do you mean I'm moving in with Mark? Like, that's not going to work in that kind of way. If we want it to be like a really meaningful solution, then you got to give people agency over who they live with.
Right. You definitely do.
Yeah.
And for example, I lived in a homeless shelter for 7 years. I don't do roommates.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not going to happen.
My
for
wife
me.
said no to roommates too, by the way.
Yeah.
Outside of me.
Right.
Yeah.
But some people, even on their own, will pull their checks and rent a place and split bedrooms, or you know what I mean? So
did you ever do it before? Like, just like,
everybody. Yeah, we all did, right? Yeah, I've done roommates before, but not after 7 years in a fucking homeless shelter.
So, I almost every time I do a shared housing workshop of some sort, I always start the conversation off of like, how many people in the room have shared housing? And a significant number of people will raise their hand because they're kind of going back, I think, in memory, most of them to like college days or something like that, right? Or like first apartment. And then I'm like, okay, let me ask this a little bit differently. How many of you have never shared housing? I always have one, for lack of a better term, rocket genius in the room that will raise their hand. And I'm like, you've never shared housing? How did you make it here to this day? You were born. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, you shared housing with your parents? I'm like, are you married? They're like, yes. I'm like, you share housing. Right. Like, you chose who you wanted to share it with. Right. Do you have children? Right. There are all kinds of different forms of shared housing. It's just, it's normalizing it. It's making it normal. And I think we as a sector have made it weird and different, instead of saying, I'm not going to tell you who to live with, but how about you tell me someone that you want to live with, and we can facilitate it. And again, understanding that it's not for everyone. As I stated, my wife was absolutely adamant that outside of family, that she wasn't going to do that. Because when she moved in with me, I had, and if you remember from our last podcast where I had Alan that I had brought in from the street. And so when she moved, and he had lived with me for so many years. And then when she moved in, he was there. Yeah. And so when when she moved in, she was like, this isn't for me. So we've got to figure out a different solution.
And thank you. I did say it was part 2, but I didn't plug your first awesome podcast. After you watch or listen to this, there'll be a link below to number 1, which was Kris's story.
Oh, thanks.
As homelessness grows, people are getting frustrated and they're pushing for laws that criminalize homelessness, which will only make the problem worse. Invisible People reaches more people, educating them on homelessness than all other homeless sector nonprofits and campaigns combined. But we do it on a limited budget. We don't have the funding they do. We are mostly funded by individual donations. And now that the economy is struggling, individual donations are disappearing, and we need you. I get it. You might not have the money to donate. Many people are struggling right now. Please share our content, share our videos. It really matters. And if you do have some funds and want to help be part of the solution to solve homelessness, please visit invisiblepeople.tv/donate. Our important work stops without you.
So we had Erica from Safe Place for Youth earlier.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I
she's great, by the way.
I did a video many years ago highlighting they had a program where if somebody had a spare room, that they would open it up. And I'm sure they were vetted, right? And there was this couple, wonderful couple, had a spare room, and they took in a homeless couple. Or a young homeless couple, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was, it's not going to work for everybody, right? You've got to have a certain, you've got to vet people on both ends, right?
Yeah.
Over the years, people will say, well, I want to take in that homeless person.
Yeah.
And I always try to talk them out of it because I've never seen it work. And normally it's not the fault of the homeless person. It's the person that's offering that one room.
It's got the expectations that come along with it.
Right. They end up becoming very challenging because at first, I want to help. And then they realize, well, that person doesn't have an income, or, maybe they leave the toilet seat up or whatever.
They're not as clean. They eat my bread.
Right. And so as a program that for homeless youth or for anybody, what I do tell them is if somebody says, I want to take a homeless person in, I say, contact your local homeless services and tell them what you want. And hopefully they have a program. But nobody does. I mean, Safe Place for Youth, they told me, but now they have to, because of funding, cut
all kinds of challenges,
I think, the way you've described shared housing, and I wrestled with many years ago, we were going to do a video on it.
Yep.
I just couldn't make it entertaining.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless we're going to do Friends, right? I didn't think of that until now, right?
We can do an episode of that.
Right, there you go. You know what I mean? So explain shared housing.
I mean, in my mind, the version that I always talk about, and I usually preface it with this of when I talk about shared housing, I'm not talking about old school sober living where you've got multiple beds that are $500 a piece or $1,000 a piece that are shoved into a room, or you have some house that has janky walls that are built up all over so that you could just make it like a kind of like a squat house or something like that. I'm talking about 2 bedrooms and 3 bedroom apartments that are kind of throughout our community. Oftentimes when we're looking as a homeless rehousing sector, right, we're working and we have single adults, we're looking for studios and 1 bedroom apartments. Well, if we had enough studio and 1 bedroom apartments, you and I might not be having this conversation, because regardless to whether people want to live with other people or not, we would have enough studios and 1 bedroom apartments. And so that's what we would continue to show. But the truth is we don't.
Right.
And at least not in an affordable manner. And so oftentimes we're moving people into units, these studios or 1 bedroom apartments that are so damn expensive that when the rental assistance ends, they can't afford the rent. There's no way that they can afford a rent, especially in a really high cost community like Los Angeles or New York or some of those, Seattle or San Diego. I mean, name the place,
Any
right?
place anymore.
Name the place. West Virginia, Morgantown, West Virginia.
Binghamton, New York, my hometown.
That's right.
Rents are getting to be LA level, and it's a 40,000 people community.
Right. So we have to start looking at other units that are available within our housing market if we're really going to make an impact. But we got to do it with forethought and and give people opportunity and option to make decisions and agency about not only who they live with, but also where they want to live.
Correct.
And so I think that's really important. So I talk about it a lot of like, let's go take a look at 2 bedroom apartments, and hey, case managers, let's not offer this up as the bronze prize. Let's talk about it as the gold prize, because oftentimes, right, when you're looking for all these 1 bedroom and studio apartments, then you find this apartment that's willing to take somebody. There's nobody else in that apartment building that has any connection to this individual. And now this individual is living in this might be a beautiful 1 bedroom or studio apartment, but they're alone and they're by themselves and they're not connected to anyone. Right. They don't know how to engage in them. And then they have no social, the social side.
Especially when you're going from a park where your whole community is people in the park.
That's right.
Or wherever you're going to fly a sign or your homeless encampment.
Yep.
You know everybody there. And now you're miles away in a box, and it can be really scary. Oh, it is really
and
scary.
Lonely.
Yeah.
A TV only goes so far, right? Like, and that's pending that you got a TV and that you have that you have internet and you have all those other things to be able to access. So to me, this gives people an opportunity to make a decision for themselves, because we're offering up those opportunities, and we're showing people 2s and 3 bedrooms, and we're saying, hey, pick the people that you want to live with, and let's take a look and let's see if that'll work. And after the rental assistance ends, so let's take that same apartment. Let's use a $2,000. Just
now, are you talking
numbers.
Rapid rehousing?
I'm talking any. You could use rapid rehousing. You can use a permanent subsidy too, a Section 8 voucher you can pay on your own.
I'm not used to, because and this could take us on another.
Part 3?
Yeah, we could. But one of the things we say, permanent supportive housing, but it's not permanent. It could disappear.
It could.
Subsidy is not permanent.
nothing is ever guaranteed, right? For some reason,
Exactly.
as many times as I like to think like, oh, this is like set and we're all good. It doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
I want to put people in situations where they're going to thrive.
Right.
And situations that they're going to thrive, not just from financial standpoint, although I do think that that's important, but also from the social side
Right.
of things too, because that's where we start to see people really start to develop
Right.
true, they're fundamentally, they start to change. Like things start to matter. They don't want to lose things that they've acquired. Anyway, with that said, when I start to think about it, if you look at a 1-bedroom apartment that's $2,000 a month, well, and then you can look at a 2-bedroom that's maybe 27. Let's use easy numbers because none of us are mathematicians here. Let's use 2,500. Or even if you go to 3,000, so $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom, you go to $3,000 a month for a 2-bedroom. You're only responsible now for $1,500 and $1,500. That's still $500 savings. If you start to think of that at scale, like from subsidies, right? Just from the subsidy side of rapid rehousing or permanent housing of a Section 8 voucher, right? You could add even more, right? You don't even have to ask for more money if you start looking at putting people in 2s and 3 bedrooms. Right now, you get a 3-bedroom that's, let's say, $4,000 a month. Now their portion is even less, and I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not even trying to figure.
I'm a drummer.
Right?
I can't count past
that's
4.
That's right. So
once it gets to 4, I know there's something later, but
right. But let's just say it's like $1,350. Now you're making things more affordable. Now minimum wage jobs can actually create sustainability for people versus that $2,000 a month apartment that they couldn't do, or they might have been able to pay their rent, but they could have nothing else, and so it creates a little bit of financial capital as well. I'm not talking about millionaires here, but I am talking about the ability and the difference between being able to pay your water bill and not being able to pay your water bill because you can afford the rent. And from the subsidy side, you can bring on more units and actually house more people.
And as you're talking about it, an application that I think it would be very beneficial is rural communities.
Oh, yeah.
Where you don't have the 1-bedroom single housing stock. You have mostly rental houses.
Right.
That are 3-bedroom.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So in a rural community, which rural homelessness, like all homelessness, is growing.
Yes, it is.
You know?
And it's about to grow even more, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about to grow even more. So I think if you look at it from that perspective too, and even in an urban community like Los Angeles, like you could start to acquire from our shop, you could start looking at houses in communities and really start to make and change and help facilitate that change for people because now they're part of a community in a totally different way. So it's not one or the other. It really is about providing just an opportunity to think about things differently. And what I've always said is that our clients aren't the ones that say poo-poo to shared housing. It's that they get the feeling from their case managers that it's just, you can't afford anything else, so take it or leave it. And that can't be our approach. Our approach needs to be talking about the wins that you can get from it, the financial wins, the social capital wins, right? Like there's so many other components too, but to me, those are like the 2 biggest ones. Is just being able to have a sense of community and have some financial stability.
I was recently in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And I was out with outreach, freezing cold,
Huh.
and they're bringing people from the camps to a hotel.
Okay.
They leased out an entire hotel. So there's 180 homeless people there. And we picked up one guy, hey, you want to get out of the cold, right? Gets in the van, driving around. There's another guy, hey, you want to get out of the cold? They know each other. So as they're driving, they're saying, hey, man, you want to share a room? Because, it's 2 people in each hotel room, right? And they're like, yeah, I know you, man. We'll get along. We've gotten along before. Yeah. You know what I mean? So they'd already on their own, agreed, hey, we're going to go and be roommates, right? So go ahead.
And here's the thing on that, right? You could be roommates for a month. You can be roommates for 6 months. You can be roommates for 10 years like Alan was to me, right? Like you can decide how long you want that relationship to last. Like it could be the first step of, it doesn't always have to be a forever.
Is it better to master lease?
What I like about the master leasing in terms of doing the shared housing is that you're removing the component of having to ask every landlord, one landlord at a time, to now do split leases. So I think it makes it easier. And we've seen that in Los Angeles. We've brought on a significant number of master lease units that are shared housing type environments. And yeah, it makes it a lot easier because now, once again, I don't have to ask. I am the landlord or the system, right? Not me. But the system is a landlord, and that now we can really create an opportunity for people just to rent their room at a much more affordable price.
Master leasing makes so much sense. And for those of you watching or listening, master leasing is the nonprofit is the lease, signs the lease, and then the nonprofit manages the tenants, if you would.
And in Los Angeles, we're doing a different spin on it, where it's the government actually entering into the lease agreements and releasing the nonprofits from that fiscal and financial responsibility and all the liability
comes along.
Until Doge comes along. But it's removing all the liabilities from the nonprofits and allowing the nonprofits to just deliver the service and holding government accountable for what government should be held accountable for, which is helping to bring on these units without putting the risk on community.
So it's managed, well, the logistics of paying rent and all that could be managed by accounting or whatever.
Sure.
But where how can I say this? So it's the case managers. I mean, how do you do roommate match?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because that can be a challenge.
It can be a challenge. And oftentimes, right, this has happened a lot, where people are like, to your scenario, hey, you're getting in the van. I know you. Can we be the people that share the room? Because I've already known you and we've lived together. And then you move them in and they're like, train wreck, I mean, if you think about marriages, the number of marriages that end in divorce.
I mean, it happens in college. It happens in the army.
It happens in I mean, the reason I use marriages a lot is because this is someone you chose. This is someone you vetted.
Right.
And it still doesn't end up well. Yeah. And oftentimes it doesn't end up well because living with people can be difficult. It can be difficult. It's where you see people at their best. It's where you see people at their absolute worst. Right. And so for me, I had the ability while I was at my former organization, we built a really cool tool that did roommate matching. It was kind of like, oh my gosh, what's it called? The dating app.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Tinder, Match.com.
Match.com. Right. So I used to call it like the Match.com, if you will, right? And it really starts to look, and the way that we built it was very intentional, not just about like, you need an ADA unit, you need a bottom floor unit, you're a smoker, you're not a smoker, like those types of things, but really diving into the personalities of people. So like things like, this is like my favorite one, like, you're a sports fan. And you say, yeah, I like sports, right? Whatever. And then we ask the question, okay, you're a sports fan. You come home and your roommate is hooping and hollering over a bowling match, right? Yeah. I didn't even know bowling was a sport.
Yeah.
I have to move immediately. B, I'm going to sit down and watch the bowling match with them. C, I don't care. I go to my room and close the door. But really to understand. So because really where people start to fall apart is where they just can't click, right? In terms of personality and in terms of things that matter to them. And so we built this really cool tool that really dove into the personality components of things. And I know lots of other communities now are in the process of or already have, San Diego being one that's also built a pretty cool tool around being able to do the match of folks. That helps. It also helps when you have two guys, like your scenario, where they say, I've identified someone I want to live with. Right. And we still have them do the tool, right? Answer the assessment, so then you can determine if they're truly a match or not.
You reminded me of a quick story. My second shelter was the Dream Center. So I was in the discipleship program, which is, two cots in a small room. And for whatever reason, they partnered me with this really old, cranky guy, right? They call it.
Who comes to mind when you say that? Jerome. Just
kind of Jerome's personality, but they called him Pops, and he was really short.
Okay.
He's extremely, like 4'11", right? And his story was some hippie dude was driving through a park in Florida, saw him homeless, and said, "Oh, there's this Dream Center. He'll get you off the street. Okay. I'll drive you there." So they drove from. This guy didn't know what he was going into this, coerced religious programming stuff, right? So he was extra cranky, right? But my grandfather was this way. He didn't want to shower. He didn't clean himself, and he smelled.
Got it.
Right? I mean, he just smelled
Rough.
Really bad. And I would try everything. Like I would leave a bar of soap on his cot, right? You know what I mean? I would try things. You know, I'd try talking to him. I'd try him. Nothing would work.
You'd buy him brand new towels and leave him on his bed. Look at
Oh
this
my
great set of
gosh.
towels.
And one time I came back and he smelled so bad. And I opened up the window and I said, "Pop, sugar." And he got on the bed because he's really short. He goes, "Come on, you fucker. Come on, you fucker." And he wants to fight me, right?
Yeah.
And it was so funny. I had to leave.
Yeah.
Like, here's this little short 85-year-old guy.
And you're
that's
like, I'm
gonna,
not going there.
Right.
Yeah.
You know? And that's a roommate story.
Yeah. I mean, I have bad roommate stories too, right?
I'm sure everybody
I mean,
does.
yeah, my the very first apartment coming out of homelessness that I did have, I moved in with my best friend. That lasted all of like 8 weeks, maybe at the tops. It just didn't end very well. And you know, the thing that I talk about also too when I talk about shared housing is don't use one bad roommate situation and apply it to all things moving forward, right? Like in the same way that, like, are you still with your first partner that you ever were with in your entire life? The answer is, for most people, is no.
I think
right?
the divorce rate is 50% and above.
Right. And so it's thinking about, like, just because something didn't work once doesn't mean it's not going to work every time. It just means that set of circumstance wasn't the right set of circumstance. But there likely is a set that will work. And so the thing that we have to decide is, how do we, though, I think as a system, like, how do we start to engage in that conversation and really fundamentally change the mind of the casework community that this is a viable option and that there are ways to move this forward, and that there are really good success stories of when it did work, of when people did work. We don't have the person jumping on the bed, but we have the Allens of the world. Or I think Marilyn would say, right, if you remember from my first podcast where Marilyn brought me in and I lived with her for 3 years, like, that was a really good roommate situation. It just worked for us in the same way that it worked for me and Alan for so long. So I think it's about finding that right balance. But matching is important. If you force me to live with someone who, like, obviously as an LGBTQIA person, right? Like, if you force me to live with someone who hated me, that's going to be really uncomfortable, but also it could be really dangerous. And so we have to be mindful of who we're connecting, who we're putting, and who we're putting together, so that we're creating safe environments for folks, but really giving the agency to the person to make the decision about who they want to live with.
We have a perfect storm of homelessness coming. We've had, right? Lack of affordable housing. You have automation, which is going to kill most jobs.
You know, all you got to do is go outside and you see the little robots, like, doing the food delivery
everywhere, right? So the automation will create some computer science jobs, but the entry level jobs that people rely on, or like once you fall into homelessness, then let's say you go to a sober living, or you go to a shelter, or you go into housing, those entry-level jobs are really the next step, and they're going to disappear. And that's going to create. And then who could have seen the Trump administration just, cutting the workforce, right? You know, who knows? By the time this podcast airs, who knows what it'll be.
A bunch of my friends lost jobs yesterday.
Whether we had, whether it be COVID or whatever, the housing crisis is not going to be fixed anytime soon, right? No. Automation is coming. We have a perfect storm of homelessness coming. So whether it's permanent supportive housing or shared housing, we need all the different tools to get people off the streets, to get people out of shelters.
We need affordable options for people as well, right? And
True.
And so for a lot of our folks that are going to be on really fixed, and I use this a lot when I talk about seniors that are falling into homelessness for the first time. And I think we talked about this also in the first episode. So we touched on some things around shared housing for sure, where, this couple was living outside on a mattress. And then when I engaged them, they had lived in the same apartment in a Tarzana, which is a really nice community, or, a nice community in Los Angeles. And they were there for 25 years. And then their rent raised year, over year, and and their Social Security didn't keep up with it, and they found themselves living outside. Like, we very easily could have connected those individuals before they had ever fallen into homelessness immediately back to another housing opportunity by renting a room in the community, back to that original story that you had. But we're not thinking about that.
Right.
You know, instead we bring them into beds, but like engage in some of those conversations, because so many of our people that are going to exit the system also cannot afford to enter into their own unit unless they have that permanent subsidy. Whether it's permanent or not, that's to be decided. But
Right.
nonetheless, unless they have that subsidy, they're not going to be able to afford it. So we have to start engaging, and we have to start thinking about using more tools in our toolbox and not assuming that they're not going to work. Engage. You know, I had this conversation. I'll never forget this. I had somebody that I was talking to in DC, and they were like, Kris, we really love the shared housing model. Like we believe that it's going to work. We believe that it's going to work for our low acuity people. And I was like, why just your low acuity people? Like, to me, engage everyone you're talking to. Some of our highest acuity people, like I think about this a lot when I think about COVID and all the hotels that we stood up during COVID. And in some way, the hotels were like a version of shared housing because, they had a lot of communal space and such. And all day they were like hanging out with one another in each other's rooms. And then at the end of the day, they would go back to their room. But the number of people's lives that were saved during COVID from like administering things like Narcan to somebody OD'd, or people were not feeling well, they got sick with COVID, like all of those things, they had community around them versus just leaving people in total social isolation, which is also not beneficial. So when I think about when people engage in that conversation with me, they're like, this is only for this group, or it's only good for youth, it's only good for seniors. I come back and say, who are you to decide? Why don't you just make the offer? How about this? How about you taking people to a 2-bedroom unit, some people that may have been matched with one another, you take them to a 2-bedroom unit and you let them decide.
Let them decide.
And if they say yes, great. If they say no and they're like, you know what, I don't want to do a roommate, then we can engage in a different conversation. It's not a one size fits all, but it certainly has to be an intervention that we're thinking about, that we're talking about and discussing.
And you said something that sparked a thought, an idea is, there used to be housing for the working poor, the YWCA, YMCA, SROs. There was places for people, a type of housing, and shared housing is that solution or a solution.
Yeah.
I mean, not just for homeless people, but for prevention, people falling into homelessness.
I had this, it's like that whole problem solving diversion kind of conversation. I used to talk about this a lot too in my former life as a provider, of when people are coming through the front door and they're saying, hey, I'm falling out of housing. Like, I've got my eviction notice. And you're like, the first thing I would tell my team was, ask if they're like in a 2-bedroom apartment and they're by themselves or something like that, or they have extra bedrooms, whatever that case may be. And they would say, why? And I said, because maybe we can get them a roommate so that they actually don't have to lose their current housing. And also, the other question is then, have you looked to rent a room, or do you know anyone that you might want to partner up with that we can help try to identify housing for you so we don't have to bring you into the system? Because the truth is, most of our people are going to exit in that kind of scenario anyway. They're not going to exit into this ideal, driving the car off into the sunset, into this, into these 1-bedroom units that just quite frankly don't exist to the extent that we need them to
and they're
exist.
Not going to.
And we can have real throughput to our system if we started engaging in people and continue to engage in conversations about, let's try to find you someone that makes sense for you.
Los Angeles just lost 10,000, maybe
more,
15,000 units. Yeah. Maybe 20,000 units.
Yeah. If you thought we had a housing crisis before.
Right. And what did the landlords do? They started price gouging.
That's right. Immediately.
A lot of them.
A lot.
And so if you look at that.
Well, if you look at that and the fact that, their houses aren't going to be rebuilt in 6 minutes. Yeah. Some of these folks are looking at, a 3 to 5 year trajectory before their houses are going to be rebuilt. They're going to need to live somewhere in the interim.
Right.
And now we have this even greater sense of like, oh my gosh, like our people already were discriminated against when they were trying to go and get units. And now they're going to be competing with people potentially that have had long-term employment, that were homeowners, they're just waiting for the homes to be rebuilt. Yeah. So our market just became even more challenging. Yeah. Like, and I've said this a lot in the last several weeks of, we have to engage in the conversation again. We need to bring it back up and really start to train and to educate people around what shared housing is, and start to get rid of the impression, right? And kill all the fallacy. I don't even know if that's a word. Did I just make up that word? I don't even know. But like the misnomers about what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah.
Like it is a viable option. What is really important to people is the agency around where they live and who they live with.
Well, what's the roadblocks? Because the only time I hear shared housing is when I'm around you or when I'm at a conference and you're speaking about it.
Yeah. You know, good news is I'm not the only one speaking about it anymore. Right. And there are
Now,
some other,
it's now panels.
Right. Because I think people have it in their head that it's never going to work. How do we get people to live together? People don't want to live with other people. They want to be by themselves. Permanent housing means independent housing, you know, one person, one unit. And we have to change our narrative. We have to change our messaging. We have to rebrand it in a way that's meaningful, that speaks to people. And again, I would say that it's not about convincing the people that we're so fortunate to be able to serve every day. It really is about convincing ourselves that it's a viable option, about normalizing it. And that's why I always start my conversation with, again, not to be on repeat mode, but of like, how many of you have lived in shared housing or how many of you haven't lived in shared housing? Because the reality is every single person in that room has at some point in their life shared housing, and it's totally normal. And we've got to change the messaging. We have to rebrand it back to that and really start to create models to show people how it can work, and to start really expanding upon the tools that are in existence, the match.coms, if you will, to make it work.
Well, if you have 3 people that are living in a 3-bedroom apartment, each with their own bedroom, you've ended homelessness for 3 people.
Yeah.
If you have 80 people living in tiny shacks in a tiny shack village, they're still fucking homeless.
No shit. Like, it's a no-brainer. That's why I tell people all the time, like, you've got to take and remove your own bias and allow people the decision to write their own, let them decide. But also don't start, you know, it's very interesting. So with our master lease units, what I think is really interesting is that we brought on so many of them that are like these, they're what I would call student housing. They were single family homes that were taken down, and triplexes were built. And in each one of those triplexes, there's roughly like 8 units or something. And every one of the units has their own room, their own bathroom, and their own refrigerator, their own microwave. The only thing they share is like if they want to use the stove or the oven. And when we got those buildings, I remember engaging with a lot of the provider community about, hey, we brought on these units. They're going to be available pretty soon. You know, we're gonna open up some housing fairs for you to bring your clients through to take a look to see if they were interested. And the pushback, it was so interesting, was like, oh, our clients will never take that. And I'm like, why don't you just take people from your motels or from the encampments, put them in a van, and say, hey, we have some units for you to take a look at, and drive them over to the units. And if they get to the unit and they hate the unit, don't force the issue. It's not going to work for them. That's great. That's great. Or at least this particular one might not. But that also doesn't mean another building might not, or a 2-bedroom apartment might not, right? But get them there. Our first building that we brought on, we leased up those 27 units. I'm sorry, 17 units. We leased up those 17 units in less than 2 hours.
Oh, yeah.
People did not say no. They came in and they were like, these are beautiful. These are really cool. Like, I want to live here. So we continue to bring on more of those. And you know what? Every one of those buildings leased up in exactly the same time frame. Like, there wasn't a challenge in getting people to a yes. You just got to put them in the car and drive people there and say, hey, do you want it? And here's the other thing. Permanent housing doesn't mean this is your forever home.
Right.
This could be your first step.
Right.
And if your circumstances change, if you're making more money, or if you get a voucher, if you want to move to a different neighbor, like, all kinds of things can happen. No one says you have to be here forever.
Right.
But we're making the decision that people, right? And that was what was so interesting. We made the decision that people were going to say no, and they did not say no. They said yes repeatedly over and over and over and over again. And I think that's the narrative that we need to be sharing. That's the narrative that we need to be talking about more and highlighting more, is get people in a car and take them to a unit. Let people decide who they want to live with. Do some vetting to make sure that they're good. In my former organization, we did speed dating. So after they would fill out their surveys and we would identify people that were potentially good fits, then we would invite them all meet and greet, right? I like to call it speed dating because that's just more fun. And then we would set them up and we would give them sheets where they answered questions differently, but they weren't like a total X factor where we would be like, there's no way we can have these people live together. But we would show them, we wouldn't show them how the other person answered. We would just highlight the questions where they answered differently. And we would highlight it for them and say, these are the questions that you're going to focus on the things that were different to see if you can find common ground. Because if you can, then you might want to live with this person. But if you can't, then again, you get to decide that even though you were pretty close in all these other areas, that this is not someone that you want to take a chance on. So that was really great because not only did we have this tool that potentially matched people, but then we gave them an opportunity to meet and to decide, right? Cool. And then we'd start looking for units to get them into. I think we need to do more of that. I think we need to start encouraging more of those things. In San Diego, a couple of months ago, we did a 100-day challenge on shared housing, and this was so cool. And in the 2 previous years around shared housing where they were really trying to uplift and get that effort going, they got 10 people housed. And during the course of 100 days, while it's not like the numbers aren't off the charts per se, but we engaged not all the providers, just a small group of providers. They got 69 people housed in 100 days in shared housing situations. They were able to bring on landlords because they weren't doing master leasing, but they were able to bring on landlords that were willing to do those split leases, and they were able to identify people. And I had the privilege of being at 2 different times where they did the meet and greets. And it was so cool. There were so many people outside and they were so excited to meet one another, people that they had potentially been matched to, and they got to decide. Wow. They got to decide. And I think they did some videos of it after, of like the people that had moved in together a few months after they had moved in, to just like check, like, just do a pulse check of like how things were going. And many of them said like things were great. And many of them said like, we hit some speed bumps, but we figured it out and we were able to work through it. And the thing I would say about shared housing, and particularly around roommates, is usually if you can get people through the first 90 days and get them talking and really coach them around how to mitigate issues that arise so that they're not sitting and getting angry about like, you used my last piece of bread and you didn't have any right, but you actually engage in the conversation about why you didn't want him to use your bread, and you really get people talking. Yeah. They're able to flourish and they maintain those relationships. And again, it doesn't have to be forever.
So how do people, are there resources online? Is there a bunch of information? What are next steps or anything else you'd like to add?
I do think that there's some stuff online for sure. But I'm certainly open anytime for a conversation around shared housing, and I can explore all the different ways. But there's other people that do this too, and I think we have workbooks and things like that. Like all the tools that people need, they are available to be able to connect people. But I'm happy. I'm always happy. It's like my phone number is right?
You like, but like
I really love.
Glow.
Oh my God!
I remember being in your office when you first started talking about share. I couldn't get you to shut up.
I know. Well, people did have a hard time getting me to shut up. Anyway, but when it comes around,
I wasn't going to go there, but since you did.
I don't care. It's the persona, I guess. The thing is that I really, truly believe that this is an option that has to be part of the toolbox. It doesn't have to work for everyone, but if we don't include it, we're not going to make a dent. And we're certainly not going to put people in affordable situations when they're not making enough money to be able to support themselves if we moved them into units otherwise. So I think it's an option. I think it's an opportunity. I think we need to explore it. And I think particularly under, as you said, this administration, things are a lot harder, particularly for our folks. And so we've got to explore every single opportunity that we have. Every housing opportunity that exists, we need to be jumping all over it and exploring how we can get people connected to it, period.
That's the end.